Oklahoma Gardening is a production of the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the land grant mission of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University, dedicated to improving the quality of life of the citizens of Oklahoma through research-based information. Underwriting assistance for our program is provided by the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping to keep Oklahoma green and growing. Today on Oklahoma Gardening, host Casey Hentges has an Oklahoma-proven plant with a Mediterranean flair. OSU Consumer Horticulturist David Hillock highlights some annuals that are All-America selections. Barbara Brown introduces us to a taste of Italy with a trip to a slow food cheese factory and restaurant in the Cuneo region. Back in Stillwater, she prepares an Italian-style leek soup. And then in the vegetable garden, we meet up with another undergraduate researcher.
Introduce you to another Oklahoma proven, and this isn't just one plant, this is actually a collection of plants, and that is the junipers. Behind us here we have a Taylor juniper. This is Junipers virginiana, which is also the same genus species as our eastern red cedars that we often see growing around Oklahoma. Now this is a cultivar called Taylor, and it was actually discovered in Taylor, Nebraska. And what really sets it apart from some of the eastern red cedars that we see growing around our state is the fact that this has such a columnar form to it. You can see it stays pretty tight and narrow, only growing a couple of feet wide, but it'll reach a height of about 20 feet. So it's really an ideal plant to kind of punctuate the landscape, and it works well in small spaces. Now, there's several junipers that you can add to your garden, and junipers grow anywhere from 20 inches tall to 20 feet tall. One of the most gold foliage junipers that you can add to your garden is one called Saybrook Gold. This juniper gets to be about 30 inches tall, but will have about a 6-foot wide spread on it. Now, most junipers do well in a range of soils, and they're also pretty drought tolerant once they're established.
For the past several weeks, we've highlighted some of the All-America selection winners that we've had displayed in our gardens. Today we want to conclude our highlights with the annuals that we've had out here. The first one I want to talk about is celosia. This one's called Asian Garden. It's a really nice celosia, and you really can't go wrong with celosias. I think they're awesome plants. They're really hardy annuals. This particular one grows about 30 to 40 inches high, and it has beautiful bright pink flowers on it. And you can see as it starts to develop, as the spikes are developing, they'll continue to grow and continue to elongate and continue that bright pink out at the tips. Now, as with all celosias, or most of them anyway, they are very hardy plants. They are drought and heat resistant. These are good, clean plants, no problems that we're aware of. They also make great cut flowers, both fresh as well as dried. Our next annual is marigold, and this is I've been really impressed with this one. It's a beautiful plant. This is called the Big Duck. It actually has 3 colors. There's a gold, and a yellow, and an orange in the series. These are nice, robust plants. Nice and compact though. They're well branched, but they have these fully double large flowers, 3 to 4 inches across. So they really provide nice impact, in the garden. Because of their nice, neat, compact habit, you can grow them in containers in the garden beds. But it also makes you can also create a nice little neat mini hedge out of them as well. South Pacific Orange, Canna, is our next one. This is a really nice plant. It's actually started from seed versus the tubers, which actually makes it a little bit more disease resistant. But this is a really nice compact plant, as you can see. It has more basal branching, so you get fuller look to it. It also can be grown in the garden, but also fits nicely in a container. Now with a lot of our cannas in Oklahoma, we can keep these in the ground, and they'll usually survive our winters just fine. If you're growing it in a container though, you might want to dig it up and move it indoors and protect it, or somehow mulch or keep that container protected. This is a sister to an earlier variety called South Pacific Scarlet, but as you can see, this one has a really beautiful bright orange flower. The last one we have is an annual vinca. This is part of the Mega Bloom series called Polka Dot. Vincas are in general really tough annuals as well. They love and don't mind the heat and humidity at all. In fact, I spent some time down in Houston working in a nursery down there, and we sold a lot of these down there. So they're very, very heat and humidity resistant plants. Diseases can often be a problem, but this one is supposed to be disease resistant, so that's a huge plus. And if you look at this this flower on it, this is huge compared to a lot of the other vinca varieties. So very, very wide, and this particular variety, of course, has that beautiful white petals with a bright pink center. Now these plants get about 13 to 15 inches high. Again, they're nice and compact and full of flowers all summer long. We've really enjoyed being an All-America Selection display garden this year. We plan to do it next year, so we hope you will come and join us next year as well to see what we have. If you're really interested and you really like these plants, I encourage you to go to the All-America Selection website. They have many more on there that have been chosen over the years. They're great varieties and great plants for your garden.
I've traveled a fair amount in my life, and I have always found that traveling is more than seeing things. It's seeing culture, it's experiencing things, it's tasting things, it's feeling things. And when you travel with a group of students, you get to do that twice. I traveled to Italy with a class, and they experienced and I experienced through them. They tasted and I tasted through them. So it was tremendous from that standpoint. We saw things like a farm where they had started with a dairy and expanded it to the creation of cheese, to the production of the milk, to the use of the whey, and that cheese is now sold worldwide, and they've incorporated a bread and breakfast with that, where they can host events, so that it becomes not only the facility in Italy, but it seemed like something that could sprout here in Oklahoma as well. So we were looking at not only what was happening there, but how could we adopt it here in our own state to make our lives better as well. Over the next few weeks, we're going to show you the experiences that our class enjoyed. We hope you'll enjoy it and that you'll come with us. Italy's waiting.
54.
Mi chiamo Mario Sarale.
You gave us a wonderful tour of your farm today. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got started, what you raise, what you produce here?
Barbara dice che hanno fatto un tour bellissimo qui alla fattoria e vuole sapere se dai qualche dettaglio in più sul vostro posto qui.
Certamente, grazie a voi per averci visitato. È sempre un piacere.
Mario is saying that he thanks you for coming to visit, and as he explained this morning during the visit, the place is not set up for tourists at all. It is not a crystal palace, as he calls it. It's not a fake place, but it is exactly their routinely everyday life that we get to see here, their job, what they do, what they produce, which is exactly what they do for their living. He explained that in his family it's 7 brothers and sisters. He's the 6th, and he He is a technician as other brothers. His older brother is a veterinarian. So among all of them, with all their expertise, they were able to pick up the family business and run it. And so Mario's explaining that 24 years ago, just after he was done with his studies, he went to his father, who didn't produce milk at all at that point. He was just producing, cheese. He was just producing milk. He went to his father and he asked for a little room if he could try and produce cheese. And he started with 2 or 3 types 24 years ago, and he's adding 2 or 3 types every year, and now they are up to 47.
Do your children, do you have children in the family between all the brothers that are going to follow in the business?
Sì, siamo una famiglia numerosa, i nostri figli, i miei.
So yes, there is a younger generation. They're still too young. They're still studying, and he insisted on the fact that there's no pressure on these children to get into the fold. As they did, as Mario and his brothers and sisters did, they were welcome to follow their own passions and inclinations, so it's not a given that they will be working in the family industry. This was a very nice anecdote. He's saying that, again, they weren't cheese producers before him, and it all started by chance, just because he didn't pass his last high school year. He had to repeat it. And so he went through that final exam that for us is very big in Italy twice, and so he was a bit late in looking for a job. His classmates had already done it the year previously. But it was just because of that one more year that he found the first job in a cheese factory, and he started being interested with it.
Obviously, you have a great passion for your business, and it has so many branches. I've been really impressed with what you've shown us today, where you started with the milk and then the cheese and the different varieties of cheese and then the hogs, and it just continues to grow. And one of the things that you have done is to export to the U.S. Has that been an easy process for you, working with through the red tape and through the marketing and the whole process?
No, è stato anche qua molto casuale perché.
So another anecdote actually, because he says the sending to the US and starting to work with the US market was another random thing that happened. His very first client, his very first customers 24 years ago when he started producing cheese was a person from the US, Mr. Chano from Boston, who is still today an importer of Mario's cheese, came, and he always gives this example when people say you're in the middle of nowhere. No, it's not easy to find you. But this guy at the time, 24 years ago, with no satellite, with no Google Maps, arrived in Milan with a plane and got a taxi, and he found him here in his courtyard without having had as much as a phone call. And so he started importing, but they had the most difficulties doing it in Italy, he said. And once they went through that process, they were already expert, I guess. And so dealing with the US was not a big deal.
I think this is very encouraging because Oklahoma is in the middle of the United States, and that's one of the problems that we have is reaching out and getting our products out. So it's wonderful to hear someone from even further away and have so much success in this. As you look forward, as you talk to people, what is the crystal of what you want people to think about you? What do you want your image to be as far as your business, your attitude towards what you do, and how do you want people to remember?
I prodotti fanno la loro parte.
So in a case of someone who tries the products, because of course he says most of the work is the products themselves that do it, if it's a good product. People will remember it. But he says in case of someone trying their cheese and without having been here, he would like people to think, I want to meet this guy now that I've tasted his products. I want to meet Mario.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I am so glad I did meet you, Mario.
Thank you very much.
Grazie.
Grazie, prego.
Grazie Mario, thank you.
One of the things that we find in many other cultures, including Italy, is that they start with very fresh, very good ingredients, and they work from there. And that enables them to create something that's very flavorful, yet simple, without a lot of added flavors to it. The recipe that I'm doing today is called leek soup, and it follows those principles. But it would be more of a peasant kind of dish, in part because the wealthy people didn't want to use a lot of garlic, a lot of onions, because they didn't want their breath to smell bad. So this would be people who couldn't afford the spices and didn't really have a choice as to whether their breath was going to smell bad or not. So we're starting with leeks, and one of the things I want to show you is that because leeks grow in the ground, they're related to the onion, but they don't grow into a tight bulb the way the onion does. So they're going to come up, and as they come up, the soil is going to be deposited inside the leek. So it's really important that you wash it, and you can see what happens here. As this has just been pushed up through the soil, it's got tons of dirt and other things in there that we don't want to eat. Also, this part of the leek, the part that's dark green, is really not edible from the standpoint of we're going to make a dish and use it. It's edible from the standpoint of if you wash it and you put it in with water or stock, you can flavor things with it. But this is going to become compost, so I'm going to get rid of it. Now, there's a couple of things that you can do. You notice I cut off the root end of it as well. And you can see in this part of it, there's still a lot of soil. So we need to clean out the inside of that. I can't just peel that away. The outer ones are probably a little bit tougher than I want to use, so I am going to peel that one off simply because it's going to be more tough than I want. But I'm going to have to take care of this part of it too. So a couple of things you can do. If you're going to use the leek whole, you can cut down this far and then fan it out and wash it. However, I'm going to use this leek in a little bit different way. So I've got a little bit easier to wash. Again, if I'm going to use it in halves to grill it or something like that, I can go through that and wash it that way. But I'm going to just open it that way and then slice it off into small half moons. And you notice I haven't even washed it yet because it's going to get washed in a minute, and I'll show you what I mean here with just part of it. I'm going to put this in a big pan of water. If I was going to saute this, I would do it a different way because I want to make sure it's totally dry. But this one is not going to get sauteed. It's going to get basically cooked with water, a little bit of oil, and some other vegetables. So I can do this and clean the vegetable this way and then lift this out. You don't want to drain it out or that soil will come back on, but that can go in your dish. It doesn't have to be dried out. If you're making a salad, for instance, you want to make sure that was as dry as possible. And I didn't get all the dirt there. Get a little bit more off. But that's now ready to go. And this one would be treated the same way. I've done this with 4 leeks already. I'm going to start with 4. Now, if you don't have a leek, what are you going to do? Well, you could use something like this. This is sort of a cousin of a leek, but you're going to do a lot of chopping and so on. They're just too small. If you have to use an onion, you can do that, but choose a sweet one. It's going to come closer to representing the flavor of the leek, which is milder and sweeter than that of an onion. So a sweet onion will probably come close. When we adapt recipes here in the States, we make decisions on what we can change, and that may be one of the things that you decide you need to alter. So let me see if I can get this started. Since we're not going to saute it, I don't need to heat the pan up and add the oil and then add all the vegetables in it. But I do have 2 tablespoons of olive oil that I am going to use in here. And then also in here, I'm going to add, the pan isn't hot yet, but that's okay. I'm going to add about 1 stalk of celery, which will be anywhere from half to 3/4 of a cup. About the same amount of carrots, half to 3/4 of a cup, or just 1 large carrot. And then 2 tablespoons of water. And we're going to bring that up and to a boil and simmer, reduce the heat a little bit, and we're going to cook it for about 5 minutes. We're not trying to totally cook it because there's other ingredients and more cooking coming later. We're not trying to saute the onions to develop flavor. We're just getting these things started. These have softened up a little bit. We've developed a little bit of flavor. Some of the water has evaporated, so we're getting a little bit of saute, but that's not the primary goal here. Also, I've left the lid off, and I'll leave the lid off through the entire cooking process, which is a little different than many of the times we cook rice. Rice is one of the main ingredients here, and usually when you cook rice, you use the exact amount of water you need to be absorbed. But because this is a soup, the rice is actually going to be working as a thickening agent. I've added 6 1/4 cups of you have options. I've used a reduced sodium chicken broth. You could use water, you could use half and half. I think we as Americans are kind of accustomed to a higher sodium, we have a higher appreciation for sodium than some people in other countries. So that while we have ingredients that are going to add sodium to it, it doesn't add the amount of flavor that we're accustomed to. So I'm using a chicken broth that's got some sodium in it just to kind of enhance that. I'm also going to add a small amount of salt to it as well. Now I'm going to add the leeks that go with it. See if I can get that cleaned out. And then I've got 3/4 of a cup of rice. So normally it's a 2-to-1 ratio, so we're well beyond what a normal ratio of just cooking rice would be. I'm using a long grain rice because I want this to add some thickening, and a long grain rice is going to release more starch than an extra long grain rice will. If you want even more of that thickening, you can either use a medium or a short grain rice to it. We're going to bring that up to a boil, and then we're going to let it cook as long as your rice needs to cook. This is a medium or a long grain rice. It should cook in 15 to 18 minutes. Once it comes up to a boil, we'll turn it down. If you want it to be softer and release more of the starch to do a little bit more thickening, cook it a little bit longer. Keep in mind, however, when it cools down, it's going to continue to add that thickening. So you may want it to be a little thinner when you actually take it off than it is when you serve it. I've added about 1/8 of a teaspoon or a pinch of salt to this, and we'll just stir that up, bring it up to a simmer, and let it cook. I'm probably going to let it cook about 20 minutes. I like mine a little bit thicker, but you do it to your own preference and according to the package, because there are so many different kinds of rice, whether you're using plain rice, converted rice, brown rice, and so on. Base this cooking time on the time it takes to cook the rice you're using. There you have it. You can see that the rice has really thickened the soup up. It's expanded. Remember, you can cook it less if you choose. This makes 4 servings of soup. They're going to be fairly generous. In an Italian family, they would use a large, wide soup plate. I'm going to use this one for today because it's one of the few that I have that's not white, which work better on camera. And then also, they serve it with plenty of Parmesan. Now you don't, and this is why you get so much more of the sodium content, and why you don't add so much when you're making the soup itself, because you're going to get a lot here. This you would stir in as you eat it, serve it with a side salad, and you've got a great lunch or a light supper. I hope you're going to try this one. It's Leek soup for Oklahoma Gardening. I'm Barbara Brown.
My name is Ty Bowman. I'm a second semester junior at Langston University, majoring in animal science. My project is over a tomato study. There's 3 parts. There's a greenhouse, a high tunnel, and field production. The overall gist is to see which growing method is the best for Oklahoma. So we have 9 different varieties. Some are determinate, indeterminate, and one is semi-determinate. Determinate meaning that they grow a certain length, a certain height, and they usually put on their fruit all at one time, versus indeterminates that grow as long as possible. If you just let them grow, they'll continue to grow. Okay, so we have both cherry tomatoes and slicing tomatoes. So far, the cherry tomatoes produce, of course, the most fruit, and they've produced the best tasting fruit so far, but that's because they've grown at a much faster rate versus some of our bigger slicing tomatoes that have not had the growth yet. We have not harvested most of them. The data taken from this test at the end will be compared to the tomatoes grown in the high tunnel and the greenhouse as well, to show which ones have the best yield, lycopene content, nutritional value, and quality for market production. So this has been a great experience, especially since I'm an animal science major. It was nice to see a different side of agriculture that I'm not that I'm generally used to. I want to give a special thanks to Linda Carrier, Matt Beartrack, and Dr. Brandenberger for being my mentors and helping me this entire summer, and that'll be it.
There are lots of great horticultural events this time of year. Be sure and consider these activities when you're making your plans for the weeks ahead. Next week, Casey will have another great tree to consider adding to your landscape this fall. Turfgrass specialist Dennis Martin will show how Bermuda grass varieties are put to the test of Oklahoma. Turfgrass specialist Justin Moss will visit a home with the new OSU Turfgrass Tahoma 31. Our tour of Italy will have a stop at a rock and roll butcher shop, and we'll meet another undergraduate researcher who is working on squishing squash bugs. We hope you join us then for more TV you'll grow to love. To find out more information about show topics, as well as recipes, videos, articles, fact sheets, and other resources, including a directory of local extension offices, be sure and visit our website, oklahomagardening.okstate.edu. And we always have great information, answers to questions, photos, and gardening discussions on your favorite social media as well. Join in on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find this entire show and other recent shows, as well as individual segments on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. And tune in to our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel to watch segments from previous hosts. Oklahoma Gardening is produced by the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University. The Botanic Garden at OSU is home to our studio gardens, and we encourage you to come visit this beautiful Stillwater jewel. We would like to thank our generous underwriter, the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry. Additional support is also provided by Pond Pro Shop, Greenleaf Nursery and the Garden Debut Plants, the Oklahoma Horticultural Society, and the Tulsa Garden Club.